All right. Good morning, everybody. It's me, Robert Phoenix, and we're back for another edition of the Astro Weather. And it is the 10th of May, and we are rapidly approaching summer. Wrap your head around that as 2023 dissolves like Alka-Seltzer in your morning hangover. There we go. How's that? Not a great reference, but sort of feels that way. The weather physically outside is it's dark, it's muggy, it's got kind of a boggy, foggy, misty vibe to it. Sort of reminds me of most of the weather in Full Metal Jacket. As I look out from my window, see the vegetation, the cornfield across the way. It feels slightly cinematic in some ways. I'm in a cinematic mood, quoting the Avengers at the beginning of the show. Let's get into it. Wow. There's a lot going on behind the scenes right now. In the global sense of things, there's a lot happening behind the scenes. I'm going to get into that on 15 minutes of fun, by the way. I don't know. I try to keep this segment at times not in political light. Right? I try to tailor the Astro Weather for the individual, and so the individual gets something out of it. But we're so tied to. I hate to use the word collective, because when I think of collective, I think of peasants in China with the Great Leap Forward and the Great March into the 20th century and the collectivization of labor. So I don't always like to use the word collective, because I feel like it conjures up the spirit of that sort of thing. So we'll use the word global instead. And for all you flat earthers out there, just please get over it, just for now, just for today. But there's a look how to I got an unstable internet connection. It's the story of my new internet life here. The sun is at 19 Taurus. And when you look at the sun, we have all these planets that are literally behind the sun, right? Just in terms of their visibility, of course, during the day, you can't see them. At night, you'll have a better shot at seeing them. Clearly, you'll see Venus and you'll see Mars in the night sky. Depending on where you are, you might have a good shot at Jupiter and Saturn, but everything is behind the sun, which means that all of these planets are occulted, right? And when we're in a situation like this, right, with all this planetary activity behind the sun, that means there's a lot going on behind the scenes. And we can make a case for every single station here and what that would look like and feel like. But what's on the table is relationships, contracts, and action. And Mars in Cancer is losing its steam. It's got 6 degrees left, chugging along. We talked about it yesterday. And today it's in a hard opposition with the moon. And we're coming up on that Mars-Pluto opposition. And that, to me, again, from a global perspective, is very intense and gets into the world of guns and violence and children, which seem to make the headlines. So if you are somebody who cares about the children, you're probably going to want to have your Mars radar on shortly. I'd say within the next week. Because when I see that Mars-Pluto opposition, what do I see? I see school shooting. And that I've been seeing as it relates, etc. I'll cover more of that on the 9/11 show. But as of now, Mars is opposing the moon, right? And we have the moon at 22 Capricorn. We talked about it yesterday. It's an austere moon, right? It is the moon of deferred gratification. And sometimes you have no choice with the Capricorn moon. And when I see this opposition, and especially with Mars squaring Jupiter, which can really amplify Mars. And Mars is in its detriment here in Cancer. And my sense here is that there's a lot of insecurity going on right now with the economy, with people making their rent, mortgages, interest rates. If you have an arm, boy, you better really look out for your arm. And I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about an adjustable rate mortgage. So there's I feel like the energy of the day is just a high degree of insecurity and instability with this Mars moon opposition. And the moon over the course of the day will get closer to Pluto, and we'll have that moon Pluto conjunction and still in an opposition with Mars. And so the intensity doesn't really abate that much. In fact, it gets more intense. And I think the theme from tonight until tomorrow is how to get by with a little help from my friends, right? The Joe Cocker song. And that is going to be a big piece probably over the next 48 hours. So if you're somebody who listens to your friends a lot or plays the role of counselor at times, or you're on their speed dial, get ready because those calls are coming in. Now, what I do like about Mars is the trine with Neptune, which is the creative potential. So one of the things that we've really lost touch with in a lot of ways is art, and how art as a creative process can be very cathartic and very alchemical. You know, we've gotten so entrained and inured to only accept things that feel good. And when I say feel good, it's along the lines of, well, don't have that negative thought. Oh, that's a negative thought. Don't have that. And there is truth to that. Don't get me wrong. There is some truth to that. But there's also the ability to use an artistic process in order to exercise your fears and anxieties. So one of the things that everybody can do, I'm just throwing this out there. If you're really feeling heavily anxious, or you have a sense of doom or something foreboding in the not so distant future, which we've carried around for a while, but let's say it's getting closer. Look at art as a form of therapy. And one of the things that everybody can do is create collages. Now, collages became vision boards. So they became the things that you wanted, right? The vision board, and became this objectification of your dreams, your wishes, your hopes, your desires. And I think that's fine, but I also think it's fine to excavate your fears so that they're not lording over you. Because I feel like there's a lot of heavy fear, anxiety, helpless energy going on today, right? So let's say you had a bunch of magazines laying around and you wanted to open up your artistic aperture so that you could get it out, right? Like get it out. And you could go into any number of magazines and look at images that address your fear or that are symbolic of your fear, right? It's not like you're giving your fear a portal to step through, but you are giving it a face. And there's something powerful about the process. And that all of a sudden, the tiny demons don't have any hold over you anymore. For some people, they actually enjoy writing. And some people like to write poems, even though it's kind of a lost art form. Some people like to journal, you know, as long as journaling isn't too heady, right? You want to get out of your head, you know, because that's where your fears can germinate and become these wraith-like entities that lord over your consciousness and your process. So you don't really necessarily want something that's all too logical or too rational. It doesn't always work. So today I'm in favor of the creative process. And if you feel stuck somewhere along the next 24 to 48 hours on the highway of your life, get it out. Get it out, right? And with Mars, Neptune trines, those are really great for being creative. And the thing I love about the process of art is that it doesn't really have, like, true art has its own spirit. You know, it'll come through. Like what it needs to come through will come through. And you may start off like, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and all of a sudden it takes on a completely different tone. And the best artists are the ones that withhold the judgment from their work or whatever's happening. And it's like, oh, well, kind of horrific. But at the same time, there's something about that process that gives you power over it, right? Anyway, I'm just throwing it out there as a way to not even cope, but creatively work with the energy, because this is what happens. Like in a really artistic society, people would have all these fears and all these anxieties and the kind of the unrealized or unearthed kind of parts of their psyche, and they would do something so it would come out. And then we'll use this as kind of a process-oriented place. And let's say you were able to get that out, then what can come after that? Well, beauty can come. And maybe there's beauty, again, I'm not trying to judge it, but maybe there's beauty in the explication of horror. You turn this thing, this kind of free-floating cloud of anxiety, and you turn it into something that is actually a gift in some ways. But let's say, for instance, that's just part of the process, and you want to move on to something more traditionally beautiful. Well, you clear the decks for that. And then you say, okay, well, then what inspires me? So there's a process here. I think today's a process day. The Venus-Saturn trine, again, that gets into things like support. And if you are feeling shaky, right? If you're the one that's always on the other end of the phone, if you're on the psychic or the spiritual or the emotional hotline with your friends, and you need some support, you know, look around your environment. Who can you tap into? Who can you call? Where can you go for sage advice and wisdom? Like, this is a day where it's good for that. So, you know, maybe after take your third or fourth call of the day, you kind of offload and say, okay, well, I need to talk to somebody now, right? I just need to just talk about my experiences and my feelings, and it's a good day, right? It's so weird when we have like a Venus square to Neptune, and Venus being the the ruler of beauty, right, and art. And then we have the Mars trine to Neptune. So we're really into, masculine, feminine territory, although Mars in Cancer isn't all that masculine. And the Venus Neptune square brings with it this sense of being let down and people not living up to their agreement, or not living up to the contracts. But then with the Venus Saturn trine, so this is an interesting dynamic, is in that it also brings in the potential for choice, right? There are two paths with Venus today. One, you can either renege on your commitments, allow other people to renege on their commitments, or you can hold fast to your commitment, and you could hold other people to their commitments as well with the Venus Saturn trine. Like, don't let people off the hook today, and at the same time assume the same type of accountability with this Venus Saturn trine, because it's real easy. Neptune is like oh, fuck it, I'll do it later, oh yeah, I said it then, but I don't really mean that now. No, you said it then, you need to mean it now, right? This is an interesting dynamic today. Very interesting. And then we also have this Venus Mercury sextile, even though Mercury's working its way backwards. So it does have a lot to do with agreements. Remember when. And in Taurus, it needs to be solid material, like following through. I think this is also a really good time today, specifically, to pay off some debts, right? Like if you owe somebody something, or maybe even if it's a bank thing, I think this is a good day to get it done, right? Get it off the record books. Totally get it off the record books. We still have the Sun Uranus conjunction, which is a bit wild in some ways. The sun is moving closer into sextile with Mars, although it's there 5 degrees. This is such an interesting chart for the day, because there's so much tension, and yet there's so much possibility. Once a person, i.e. you, decides on a plan of action, and one that theoretically should not be necessarily by the book. It's like color within the lines, but don't use the same colors. I mean, that's the Sun Uranus conjunction. And in Taurus, you need structure, order, and form, right? So you color inside the lines, but if the image is of a tree, color the tree purple or something like that. I know it sounds kind of kooky, but it's this interesting combination of borders, but the borders look different. Like what's inside the borders is interesting. And once you get a sense of that, you should move on it. Right? Today is one of those days that if you have a creative inspiration, like don't sleep on it. Don't sleep on your creative inspiration, especially if you have to offload anxiety, fear, all the things that seem to be pretty prevalent in our world right now. We have an in conjunct with Venus and Pluto, and those are really interesting. It's, in terms of relationships, is it a beginning? Is it an end? Are you sensing the potential for transformation in relationships? And it could go either way. Can you level up, or is it the end of the road? I mean, that's where we are with this Venus Pluto in conjunct. I would say don't be quick to act. Don't be quick to act. stay in the creative process and see what comes out. Allow that to come through. I think if you can experience something, it doesn't have to be major, like you don't have to paint the Sistine Chapel, but if you do engage in something creative, what's on the other side of that process is important. And what, you know, and I'll raise my hand on this, right? We're always looking around to find out, well, who said what's going on? You know, what is the symbolism in this? You know, how does this link to that? I mean, it's all very, very heady. There's some degree of kind of interesting, intuitive, synchromistic process when you get into the rabbit hole, and all of a sudden you find the Easter eggs. That's sexy, right? Like everybody kind of likes that when they, oh, look at this. And, you know, back in the old days, the internet was great for that. Now, not so much. But we've entrained our brains, because that's kind of a semi-rational, semi-logical process that allows for what's called associative thinking, what allows you to link things. But it's still coming from the mind. We're still taking things in, and we're taking notice, we're sharing, we're sending videos, and we're sending memes. Memes are interesting because memes are creative. They're funny, they're creative. They encompass a certain part of the brain, but they're also kind of this outlet for layers of emotional experience. But we become so entrained with using the part of our brain to understand the nature of reality that we've moved away from our more instinctive and intuitive and creative potential. And it's almost as if the world as it is, with all of the demands that it places upon us, with our salaries and our mortgages and our rents and our kids and the onslaught of living a sane life, that art almost becomes a luxury. Oh, I can't do that. I have all these other things to do. Take time out today and do something creative and imaginative, whatever it is. Whatever it is, especially if you're feeling anxious or you have a sense of existential dread, get it out. Get it out. And, you know, again, the friend hotline, I think, is going to be hopping and popping today. All right, let's look at the star of the day. Very interesting day today. A lot of interesting people. So today is Bono's birthday. And, you know, I got to say, Bono has, like if I was an astrologer in heaven and I was going to create a chart for somebody that would be immensely successful and blessed by the stars, it would be fucking Bono's chart. I'm telling you. This guy has Sun, Mercury, and I believe Venus all conjunct in Taurus, since of course it's his birthday. Third house, the voice, hence Bono Vox, right? The voice. And he has a grand trine. And he has Jupiter in Capricorn and Pluto in Virgo. So he's got a Jupiter, Pluto trine, Sun, Jupiter trine, Mercury, Jupiter trine, Venus, Jupiter trine, Sun, Pluto trine, Mercury, Pluto trine. I mean, it's a pretty amazing fucking chart. And you can tell the guy's a singer and he's rich and he's a sellout, unfortunately. And I used to like Bono a lot. I was a huge U2 fan when I was young. In fact, I think I saw their first tour in the United States, and they played, where was it? It was California Hall? San Francisco. It was either the California Hall or San Francisco Civic. And it was the first record. think it was Boy, and they were incredible. I mean, they were really, really incredible. It was, I can't even begin to tell you what that show was like. If there was the equivalent of like a rock and roll church, that show was it. Without the preaching, it was transcendent, absolutely mystical, pure, and transcendent. That's how good they were. And I've seen lots of concerts in my lifetime. And that U2 show, and I've seen them a few times. I stopped a long time ago, but that show is probably one of the top 5 shows I've seen in my life. And there's only maybe 1 or 2 bands even remotely approach that kind of transcendent potential for U2. But man, what a letdown, right? Like, this is a guy with Bono, and I'm going to talk about somebody else, but this is a guy, Bono, who really, in a lot of ways, could have changed the world. He could have changed the world. That's how impressive a chart he has. And I guess in his own way, he thinks he is changing the world, but he knows. I would like to think he knows that it's bullshit. Like his programs are bullshit. The people he hangs out with, they're jailers. They hold the keys to the prison doors. He hangs out with them. I don't know what motivates somebody like that, because at some point I think he was kind of the real deal. Like, there was something really transcendent about this guy. He had power, like a lot of power. It's in his chart. And the only thing I can think of, this is the only thing I can think of with Bono, is that when and I spent some time thinking about U2 a long time ago. Like, when you look at U2, it's not just 4 guys in a band. It's everything that goes along with U2, right? It's the stage crew. It's all these other people that are connected to the band. It is the management, all these people, right? And so when you look at like that core, they employ those people. They're part of their family. They're part of their family, right? So if, let's say, for instance, you're Bono, you could make a choice. Let's say the choice is given to you. Hey, you can be even richer, more powerful, beyond your wildest dreams. You'll tour, make records, and all the families that are associated with your group, they're going to prosper for decades, and they'll have generational wealth, and you'll be able to continue to do what you do. Would you be interested in that? Oh yeah, sure. Because if you're not, then we'll cut you down to size, and then it all goes away. And I think there could be some truth to that. And maybe he made a decision somewhere along the way to play ball with the globalist scum, so that he could have the people around him reap the benefits and somehow stoke the fires of his phony idealism. That's what I think. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. But enough about him. Let's talk about somebody who, let's just say, he made a commitment. He made a choice, and his choice was very different than Bono's. And that's Mark David Chapman. Today is Mark David Chapman's birthday. He's our star of the day. And what's interesting about Mark David Chapman, we have birthdays where they're like these time twins that are pretty interesting. So the other person that's born today that I would consider his time twin, not the same day, but another year, obviously, is John Wilkes Booth. So we have 2 famous assassins born on the same day. And when you look into Mark David Chapman's story, it's a really, really interesting story. and a tortured one in a lot of ways. He had a hellacious relationship with his father. And what, the guy, he fucked off and took drugs, and eventually he kind of moves through that. And then he works for this group called World Vision. He finds God. He travels all over the world. I mean, he has a weird backstory, a really, really weird backstory. And one of the things that really struck me when I looked at his chart was the moon, right? And then over here, the true node with Pallas, which I'm going to talk about. Let's just separate the true node and Pallas out for a moment, and let's just deal with his moon. What is his moon doing in his chart? Absolutely nothing. You have a sesquisquadrate and a semi-sextile with the moon. No major aspects. And, for all you kids who are keeping score at home, the moon is how we channel our emotions, right? And he has it in Capricorn. And again, it is cool. It is austere. It is matter of fact. It is not the warmest moon in the zodiac, even though it's got a decent placement in the second house. But there's nothing going on there. Mark David Chapman, lonely motherfucker. This guy's lonely. You just see his moon is just hanging out there. It's like nobody understands him. And he has all this activity going on in his eighth house. Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. What do we got here? Cazimi. So there's the impulsive nature here with Jupiter-Uranus. South node in Gemini. We're going to get into the true node in Pallas because it plays a big role in his chart. We have Mars in Gemini. Right. Mars, of course, being related to things like guns. And I guess I could make a case that perhaps through Mark David Chapman's peregrinations and his various gigs with groups like World Vision, who I think have their own strange infrastructure, one could make a case that Mark David Chapman was programmed on some level. On another level, I think whatever he did with Lenin might have been independent of that, which I'll get into. He has Saturn also in the 12th house. And the position of Saturn in the 12th house natally usually brings with it a type of alienation. Like no matter how successful and functional people are in the everyday world, if you have Saturn in the 12th house, you never really feel like you're here. You always feel out of place, like something's wrong, something's amiss. And so you have to deal with Saturn, right? That's the thing with Saturn. You have to deal with Saturn, wherever it is in your chart. I had Saturn in my second house. I have it in my second house. For the longest time, I was, didn't have a lot of money. Right. And I had to deal with that Saturn. It was not fun, but eventually you kind of figure it out and you get it later in life. And if you have Saturn in the 4th house, you got family problems, right? Usually it's stemming from the father. But eventually with Saturn there in the 4th house, what do? You establish your own family. You establish your own rules, your own order, right? It takes time. The 12th house is the soul. It's the house of the soul. Yeah, it's institutional. And yeah, he's in prison. And that's where Saturn is. But it's also like looking to fill, who was it? Was it Descartes, the God-sized void? He's looking to fill the God-sized void. And so with Saturn in the 12th house, you have to move, right? You have to move out of the world at times so you can spend time over here and understand the deeper spiritual nature or your relationship with what we would call God with Saturn here. One can make a case that Saturn in the 12th house is the quest to find God the Father with Saturn, whatever kind of manifestation it takes. Now, here we have a yacht, right? We have Mars, there's Mars, and then there's Venus. And I would say that there is a part of Chapman's story where he is programmed, but it's not the full extent of it. If you look into Mark David Chapman is what we would call today a conservative. He was a conservative. And one of the things that he hated about John Lennon was that he was phony. And when he heard Imagine, the song Imagine, that was the thing that pushed him over the edge. And he said to himself, this guy is telling us not to have any possessions. You know who else called Lennon out for that? Who was it? There was somebody else called him out for that. I think it might have been Frank Zappa. But he said, look, this guy's telling us not to have any possessions. And yet he has villas. And yet he has yachts. And yet he has private jets. And yet he has fancy cars, right? Like he thought John Lennon was an absolute hypocrite. And not only that, but when Mark David Chapman went through his Christian conversion and Lennon had his big row about God is dead, the Beatles are bigger than God, right? That tweaked him. So he saw John Lennon as somebody who ultimately was dangerous. Now, again, could he have been programmed with all that crazy shit going on in his eighth house, the yacht? I would say, yeah, there's a really good chance this guy could be programmed. He's got Pluto in Leo in the ninth house. And that gives us a clue. The ninth house is ideological. The ninth house is ruled by Sagittarius. And what is Sagittarius? It's truth, right? Didn't John Lennon say, just give me some truth? All I want is the truth. Mark David Chapman, in some ways, was the truth. And why do I say that? Well, let's go down here. This is the part of the chart that I think bears witness. He has Pallas in Sagittarius, and he has the true node in Sagittarius. Pallas conjunct the galactic center. Pallas, the arbiter of patterns. And in the sign of Sagittarius, what does it do? It notices patterns of illusion and truth. And with that true node conjunct Pallas, and we'll even throw in the trine to Pluto, and well, it'd be kind of a wide trine to Venus. But let's just work on this. Mark David Chapman was compelled in his chart to do what he thought was truthful, which was to eliminate John Lennon, whom he called a socialist, by the way, anti-God, and a hypocrite. This is what I think drove him. Did it make him easy pickings for other people? Yeah, quite possibly. John Lennon had a lot of enemies. He had Mark David Chapman. He had the FBI. I mean, John Lennon pissed a lot of people off. For Libra, the guy pissed a lot of people off. I think, what did he have? Mars and Libra, maybe? But this was the motivating factor, ultimately. Mark David Chapman was moved to kill John Lennon because ultimately that was truth, that he was an executor of truth or an executioner of truth. Whether it was in his own mind or in his own chart, it's here. The loneliness of being misunderstood, the austerity of the Capricorn moon, it all plays a role. And even the potential for some programming here plays a role. But at the end of the day, who pulled the trigger? It was Pallas in the true node who pulled that trigger. I'm telling you. Mark David Chapman and I'm not lionizing him, but I will say this. He is one of the few people that in the public sphere executed on his own version of the truth. Whatever you think of him, right? And again, he's got weird programming in the background, especially with his father, especially with World Vision. And I think they're probably piling on that. But the guy executed on this Sagittarian sense of righteousness, truth, and the patterns and the inconsistencies that one individual exhibited in their life. And did he hate Lenin? I don't think so. There's probably part of him that loved Lenin. He got his autograph earlier in the day. Lenin autographed his record earlier in the day. He's been eligible for parole 12 times now. His 13th parole hearing will take place in 2024. In the meantime, he spent a lot of time in solitary confinement. He's been deemed a danger to himself and other inmates. Very strange person. Very, very strange. And again, he shares this day with John Wilkes Booth, right? The three-lettered killer, the killer with the three-letter name. In some ways, they kind of, I wouldn't say they popularized him because Lee Harvey Oswald was there before Mark David Chapman, but he's in that category. He's in that camp. James Earl Ray, Mark David Chapman, John Wilkes Booth. And give me the truth. All I want is the truth. Well, somewhere in that hacked and muddled mind of Mark David Chapman, he was dealing with something that I think we all deal with. When we look at people like Bono is a classic example. Bono, you could make a case that Bono's the new Lenin, right? Bono would be the new Lenin. He still hasn't found what he's looking for. He still sings that song. Oh, really? You still haven't found what you're looking for? Seems like you found a lot of other stuff along the way. Anyway, that's our star of the day. I know it's a little dark, but interesting, right? Like when you look at the chart, and we're looking at the chart as kind of a litmus. You see that palace and you see that true node. And even Black Moon Lilith in some ways in Sagittarius. This guy was moved by his version of the truth and what he viewed as the ultimate hypocrisy of John Lennon, telling other people how to live while he himself didn't abide by his own code. All right. Please, a couple things here. Meet me over on 15 Minutes of Flame. We're going to have a robust discussion today about things that are related to Mark David Chapman and John Wilkes Booth. Right there, 9/11 Central Standard Time. That is the web address, 15minutesofflame.com. And of course, if you're interested in CBD and even helping out my buddy Chris, let's see if his thing is still up there. Let me just go here. True Hemp Science. Let me see if it's up here. Yes, you can still vote. So you don't even have to purchase any CBD if you don't want to, or you're all filled up with some of the best CBD on the internet. All you got to do is just click on that and vote for our buddy Chris and get him to be the best purveyor of CBD in the city of Austin for 2023. You could use your vote. But if you are interested in CBD, this is your place. Spend $100 or more. Type in 15MINS when you check out, and you'll get free stuff. $150 or more gets you free shipping, 30-day money back guarantee on the product, and you can make an appointment online to speak with Chris or somebody at his shop who can help point you to some of the CBD that would be the most suitable for your needs. All right, thanks. We'll be back here tomorrow. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart too simple as possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Take care. Have a really awesome day.